let's kick off with my good friend Charlotte Gill. Charlotte, thank you for coming on today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Calvin, and likewise.
Not at all. It's quite strange for me because I'm used to seeing you behind the camera, behind the scenes. You were, of course, one of the many people who made GB News work. But I didn't know you were so sound while you were there. I'm
I guess
loving
it was
your.
more behind the scenes at the time, producing, which did help, doing doing news stories and sort of getting an idea of the
But I'm
different. It broadened me out. I was writing columns before that, but then having to do lots of different news sort of broadened out my scope.
okay. Well, I apologize. I was muted at the beginning, technical glitches, but welcome to the Common Sense Crusade if you missed that part. Now, Charlotte, I've been loving your work so far. You kind of, I suppose you've launched an independent platform, but you've been delving into areas that matter, and there's a lot that I want to cover with you. So I'll start with the most important aspect, which I believe is euthanasia before we get to the who's funding this stuff, right? So euthanasia is, of course, a topic that's going to be debated in the House tomorrow, isn't it? Yes, as we speak, it's tomorrow. They're having the 5 hour debate. And of course, in Westminster, you noticed that there are advertisements left, right, and centre for this stuff. Let's have a look at Charlotte's video. Samson, thank you.
Okay, here I am at the infamous assisted dying adverts at Westminster Tube. There are quite a lot of them, so if I walk down this way, I'm also going to get, hey, fancy a bit of assisted dying. Now this is the bit, and there's also over there, this is the bit that no one is paying attention to. Global, right? Let's look over here too. Global, right? I'm going to say this a million times, and I look crazy again because I'm in a tube station. Global and global. Global.
Okay, let's
Would
pause
you
that there
want
and look at the
the
next
tea?
slide because our friend and former colleague John Wong points out. Remember this beach body advertisement that was not allowed on the London Tube because it's too offensive. I mean, having a standard white woman that is slim wearing a bikini, summer wear, for goodness sake, is offensive to the masses. However, assisted dying is not. Charlotte, what was your take on that?
Well, it's interesting because the first time I ever decided I didn't like Sadiq Khan was that Beachbody advert being censored. And that was in 2016. And I wrote a blog about it. It actually got translated into French. It was quite interesting because people were quite astonished by it across the world. But it just told me something about his kind of far left intention, because it just showed from the start that he was a very censorious person. But it's just complete hypocrisy. I mean, we've even had the Communist Party now advertising on the tube. There's been some strange things advertised over the years. We've even had TfL, technically, they're not meant to have political causes in terms of advertising, but we've had advertising in London that the Mayor of London has a partnership with, and that was used to encourage young people to vote. So it has been very political quietly. And I don't know why I noticed this. For some reason, I just started picking up clues in the environment of, like a spy. And and I basically just started spotting all these things and them not really making sense. And then I was looking into the company that owns a lot of the adverts on the tube for a different reason, because I'd noticed that a lot of people working for it were sort of putting out similar messages on Twitter, and it was beginning to look quite coordinated. So I started doing a lot of research about who is this company Global, as I said in the video. And I remember stumbling upon how they'd branched into outdoor advertising, and they saw this as a really big opportunity for them. And, this is the future now. So it was sort of planted in my head. And then I started noticing, I kind of put two and two together with divisive adverts, led by donkeys, for instance, has a
Well, let's
glow.
pause on that because I do want to get to that because there is a connection here between mainstream media, advertisements, and activism, and they all seem to collude. And we will get to that, but I want to address what they're colluding on at the moment first, because it's such an important debate. This assisted suicide, assisted dying, euthanasia, whatever they want to call it, it doesn't matter to me. It's all about killing vulnerable people, which is a problem. But it seems to be pushed down our throats so openly and everywhere. There seems to be a lot of money behind this. But I wanted to get your take, Charlotte, on why you think it's wrong and why you think we should have this conversation.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'm an atheist, and it's strange actually because I come from Catholic origins, my family, and I'm like, is this coming through? There's something I just find abhorrent primarily about this campaign, that there are people that are disabled and they are scared. And I just don't see how you can push through. It's a very complex issue. We don't want anyone to be suffering really terribly at the end of their life, which is palliative care, which that's meant to accommodate. But in the first instance, it just makes me deeply uncomfortable with the fact that people are so scared. But the way that it was pushed through raised alarm bells for me, because what you find with Labour is that because there's been this quiet lobbying in the background that most taxpayers and voters aren't aware of. So this assisted dying lobbying has been going on for even decades. But because it's not out in the open, it's not illegal, but it's not known about, it gets sprung upon the taxpayer and voters. That it's sort of like, oh, we're doing assisted dying. And yeah, the bill's going through and we're going to have a really quick debate, but, let's get it over with. And people are like, they can't even get their heads around the fact that where did this come from? Never mind it being rushed through such a serious a bill that has a lot of problems that other people have pointed out. And part of getting it through is the advertising. It wasn't actually me that pointed this out. It was Guido Fawkes that first pointed out that, and I'll just read that article to be accurate. So this is in terms of online advertising.
Well, I'm going to bring it up on the screen in a moment anyway. But
okay.
I think you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your point is that they're propagandizing. And this is a concern that I have, because I obviously talk about this issue from a faith perspective. So I talk about us being made in the image of God and stuff. But I'm interested in your take as an atheist, because the government and the media and the advertising agencies all colluding together, as well as activists, to force this, to ram this down our throat, to legislate it as quickly as possible. It rings alarm bells for the same reason that the forced vaccine mandates did, that the enforced wearing of masks did. It's this rapid changing of our culture and our ethics and our morality without a real conversation. Is that part of it?
Yeah, I do think, I mean, whatever your views, it's not a good state for a society to be in, where you can't even properly debate matters. I mean, I'm with you, like in terms of the vaccines, that made me incredibly uncomfortable being basically coerced into it. And I'd read a lot of stuff from Kate Bingham about, it was October the year before, and she'd said, no, we will not be giving it to the under 50s, because when you start to do that, the risks start to outweigh the benefits. So I'd done the right thing. I'd read an article and I was quoting the expert. And then it was just like, no, you're going to get the vaccine. And, if you so much as just want to be like, hang on, I feel a bit anxious about this. Like, can we women my age were actually some of the most hesitant. They were some of the most anxious, according to polls on it. But I guess it's deja vu in a way of, it's just like, oh, quit with your questions. We're just getting on with this, and even to ask and want a debate is sort of to be a bit of a heretic, or, a bit of a wronger. No, you and your questions.
Misinformation, disinformation. So the way they're forcing it through is one concern. The other concern, of course, is the slippery slope. And we've seen what's happened in Canada, how quickly this situation turns from we've got to help people in their suffering to actually that person's a burden, let's kill them off. I don't know if you've seen this story, we'll bring it up on the screen now, that a suicide pod malfunctioned in Switzerland. And in the post-mortem, they found strangulation marks on the victim, which suggests that the method they chose to end their life with didn't actually work, and someone ended up doing the job for them. I don't see how this could not be murder. It's not to suggest that this would happen here, but it's just how quickly things can turn sinister.
I mean, it's just insane that, that we have a suicide pod. It's just utterly horrible.
But again, I imagine a lot of your work will eventually turn into, because you're such an investigative journalist, it will probably turn into who's making money from these pods and where who's funding this sort
Yeah,
of thing.
it yeah, it does get. I mean, I haven't got to the pods yet. And to be fair, it's the first time I properly like stared at one. Like, oh God, that's really,
Uh,
really. I mean, I've sort of seen it, about, but it's really horrible. But yeah, I guess because I sort of see the surface level, and then it's that going below surface, and the more you go, and the deeper you go, the more you get told, be careful, don't do it, you sound crazy.
yeah.
And the trap is that you find such crazy information that you like, maybe I am going crazy because it's that crazy. It's very easy to play on, you're in such a disorienting place anyway. But yeah, it's I call it an iceberg model, but equally it's like an ozone,
Mm.
you're penetrating the surface further to the ozone, and all the, everything's coming out from there ultimately. But what I tend to spot is the sort of surface manifestations of that. Yeah.
Well, I know you've got to get to Dan Wootton after this, so I won't keep you too long. But and I do want to get to global. But just before we move on from the euthanasia part, there is no support for this. So Guido have put up a poll that shows that actually there is no public support for assisted dying, and even the poll that the pro-assisted dying lobby did, assisted suicide lobby did, shows that people are not in favour of it. If we can scroll down, please, Samson. The numbers kind of speak for themselves. I think this is one that you shared, Charlotte. Over
Yeah.
over 60% are not very certain of their views. So most people don't even have a view on this yet. They haven't had time to articulate their view on this. 72% think that proof not being coerced is essential. Only 26% think the NHS is fit to offer it. The NHS is a major concern we haven't even addressed. That giving the state the authority to end someone's life is bad enough, but giving it to our NHS? Oh my goodness, no.
Yeah.
44% think assisted dying will detract from improving palliative care. So it won't even help people suffering, is what people think.
Yeah, I mean, it's deeply a lot, and it's been put forward very positively. Sort of Paul Brand, the ITV reporter who works for Global, and others have been putting out this data, framing it in a different sense. Sort of, yeah, a lot of the public do support assisted dying, and the campaign, the advertising behind it. So this is the other.
Let's get to this then. Let's
Oh
let's
yeah,
skip the
sorry.
next slide and let's go
Yeah.
to the post by Callum Miller because this is a great one here. This is the question, who is funding the suicide slash euthanasia lobby? And if we click into Yuan Yi Zhu's tweet, he put a whole thread together, which I won't go through, but I recommend people, oh, this is not the actual thread, but I recommend people follow him and check him out as well. So who is funding this lobby, Charlotte?
Well, we don't know is the truth, because so Guido Fawkes found out, and they've been doing really brilliant work. So they found out that so it's called Dignity in Dying, this group. And they spent in 90 days, this is when they wrote the article, they splashed out 180,000 on Facebook and Instagram ads.
Wow.
And the total spend since 2018, and it does go back under different names, longer than this, but under Dignity in Dying,
Mm.
since 2018, they've spent, it's gone over £650,000. And the thing is that we don't actually know who these funders are. And you know how much the left likes to come for the right. Oh, dark funders, Tufton Street, who are your funders? Right? But who are their funders? We have no idea. And the media is not going to be asking those questions in the same way that they would with the IEA or something.
But it's our turn to start asking who funds you. If we go to the next slide, it's about donations. So this one I'm looking for is order from orderorder.com. It's Dignity in Dying. So this is the group that we're talking about. Yeah, thank you. If we scroll down,
Oh, well, that's what I was reading off, but
yeah. So £650,000. So nearly £1 million has been spent.
yeah, and that's just, I don't know about their other, I mean, they're on the TFL advert, so they've obviously spent, this is just their Facebook and Instagram. their meta spending. And then we've also got the tube ads, which aren't cheap. So
So
how
someone's got a vested interest in this going through.
someone's got a lot of and Callum, yeah, his thread is really concerning because it seems a bit Malthusian, the links that he found, you know.
Right.
And one of the links that's really important that I found, because I kept thinking, right, what you sometimes find with these left-wing campaigns is the person that takes the baton and runs with them, sometimes you're like, why? Why them? And that was
Mm,
what I was thinking for Kim Leadbeater. I
mm,
couldn't work out, you know, obviously we know about the horrendous murder of her sister, but she doesn't have a link, right, to assisted dying.
right.
And so I mean, I was really glad when Callum published that because I just guessed, I was like, I think it's more in common. I think that is the link that she, you know, this
So she's
charity,
the chair of More in Common and ambassador for the Joe Cox Foundation. Okay. So
yeah.
so tell us about More in Common.
So she, you know, it makes sense once you think it was set up in her sister's name. And it seems to, it struck me, you know, now we know she works, she's been the chair. And there are all sorts of links to More in Common. So the polls that people are putting out are More in Commons. And More in Common, you know, it's people say it's a polling company, it puts out great polls. But it's also kind of it, you know, it describes itself as an incubator. And it clearly has a role sort of shaping public discourse. And it's got big funders, you know, it's global as well, like it as in it's in different countries around the world. And the Open Society Foundations, that's one, for instance. And then
Oh,
Callum found like the more Malthusian one that was talking about depopulation. You know, it really is quite dystopian.
is it
And
linked to George Soros then?
yeah, it is. Which, you know, I don't want to find, I don't want to be like, oh, you know, conspiracy. Um, but it's yeah, they've been plugging all this. More in Common's been plugging it out, and the coincidences with More in Common go even further because the very people plugging this poll is global. You know, so it's global shows like LBC, the news agents,
Mm.
Paul Brand, who works for Global,
Oh, oh.
Carol Vorderman, who's also worked for Global, and she also mentions the director of More in Common in one of her first speeches for Best for Britain. And then, led by donkeys, one of their members is mentioned in a More in Common report. And if you cannot keep up, I like honestly don't feel like,
So
oh,
it sounds like George Soros is funding More in Common, which is funding all these activists, which are pretending they care and they're compassionate, and actually it's about suffering, when truly this is about something graver, and they are just the paid shills that are pushing a political message. They may not even know the reason that the backers are funding them, but I mean, I would have guessed that it was about money. I would have guessed that they want to the medical interventions or however we're going to be killing people, the people backing it would have had a vested interest in those. Like just like with the vaccines, for example, people pushing it or making money off selling the vaccines. With this, I would imagine people are selling the pods or the injections. But actually, from Callum's thread, which I think we've got up here, there's a
yeah,
deep
well, it's important
agenda.
to say that there are other funders into the Dignity in Dying campaign, and he found some of them, and one of them was particularly so he's gone into who funds More in Common. So it's the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many foundations.
But they explicitly mention depopulation.
Yes, it's. I
This
mean,
has been a
I
conspiracy
was
theory for a long time,
I
but
was
it's
so yeah, I was really glad that Callum put it all in the thread because you know, I was investigating it alone, and also he added to my you know, these were bits. You know, I was like, I don't get the More in Common Kim Leadbeater link, like, and he worked out that she's the chair. And I was doing it alone, and I was like, "Oh God, you know, I'm going to be the crazy woman." And and then like Callum's done, you know, Callum's also like, "Whoa, this is crazy," and I'm like, "Thank God, right
yeah.
now, like back up." And he's found, you know, he's done this incredible thread with all the different links. And, I don't know for certain, like I haven't finished my investigations and
Right.
and obviously he's done his and together it helps piece things together. But it just, yeah, it feels like we're seeing, it's got at the bottom there are funders, and then you're seeing like you get away from the ozone and you've got these people sort of pushing the narrative. I don't know. I can't say for certain, like, are they paid? They're employed by Global, some of them. I can't say if anyone had a conversation with them, like, can you talk about it? I just spot patterns, I just spot, wow, that's a lot of coincidences.
But there are certainly connections, whether it's monetary or values that they share. And they're pushing an approved agenda, so to speak, and that agenda evolves around the depopulation of the general public, which should terrify everybody. And of course, those words are going to sound like they're going to trigger people. Alarm bells are going off. Conspiracy theorists, conspiracy theorists. But most conspiracy theories in recent years have proven to be true. It's worth at least taking 5 minutes to look at the threads that
Yeah.
Callum and Charlotte have put together.
Well, and it's worth saying that as well. Sometimes people don't realize, like, that they don't know at the ozone, like what the person with the funding or the multiple people with funding are actually after. It kind of gets sifted away, and then it becomes a media outlet. And then it's sort of like, hey guys, like we want to get this debate going. Can we get, so it's kind of losing a bit of but it's all, it's more coordinated, I think, than basically.
Thank you for watching my Common Sense Crusade. If you'd like to watch the whole show, you can subscribe to lotuseaters.com for as little as £5 per month, and then you get access to a bank of content as well. My show is 3 p.m. every Thursday. See you there. Deus Vult.